lines.
Israeli forces attack North Gaza's main city from both sides as war with Hamas militants enters its fourth week. The UN Security Council prepares to hold emergency meeting on Israel-Hamas situation at the request of the United Arab Emirates later today. The World Bank has warned an escalation of the Middle East conflict could spike global oil prices to average $90 a barrel in the fourth quarter. And Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu accuses the West of seeking to expand the Ukraine war to the Asia-Pacific. Further adds Russia ready for talks on further coexistence with the West. Heavy clashes continue as Israeli tanks have reached the outskirts of Gaza City. Israel's military forces said that they are gradually moving ahead with the plan of invading Gaza. Israeli troops and tanks attacked Gaza's main northern city. Israel's military said that it had struck more than 600 terrorist targets in the Gaza Strip. The death toll in this conflict so far has crossed over 8,300, a large part of them being women and children. Now, 40 trucks carrying humanitarian relief have crossed into the Gaza Strip on Sunday. Palestinian Red Crescent Society received the supplies, including food and medical necessities. A total of 118 trucks with aid have entered the Gaza Strip until now. The Israeli side has still not provided any supply of fuel, which is hampering the functioning of generator-powered hospitals there.
We are progressing gradually according to our operational plans. The offensive activity will continue and intensify according to the phases of the war and its goals. Children, women and the elderly, Israelis and other nationalities are being held by a murderous organization that committed a war crime, committed a crime against humanity of unimaginable proportions.
Now, the United Nations Security Council prepares to hold an emergency meeting on the Israel-Hamas situation at the request of the United Arab Emirates later today. The UN Security Council has failed in its attempts to stop the war in Gaza as its members were unable to approve either the United States resolution calling for humanitarian pauses or Russia's calling for an immediate ceasefire. The Israeli Defense Ministry issued video footage of what it said were maneuvers inside Gaza, showing soldiers in buildings, tanks on a main road, and airstrikes on what it said were buildings occupied by Hamas. And to tell us more about it, I'm now joined by my colleague Amritpal Singh, who is in Jerusalem. Amrit, the situation in Gaza growing desperate by the hour.
That's right, Tanvi. It is becoming really bad by the minute. I wouldn't even say by the hour. As Israel expands its ground offensive against Hamas, tensions remain high at Israel's northern border with the fire exchange between Israeli military and Hezbollah militants. And as Israel's army moves into the Gaza Strip, Hezbollah have started firing rockets into Israeli territory. Earlier, I went to a place called Shalomi, a small village, in fact, Israel's last village, right next to the Lebanon border, to bring you this report. Israeli army enters the Gaza Strip. Hezbollah has started firing rockets and missiles into the Israeli territory. They have threatened the Israelis that if they do a ground assault inside the Gaza Strip, they will open a full-fledged war front. I'm right now standing at a place called Shalomi. You can see the smoke in the air. constantly rockets are being fired by the Hezbollah into Israeli territory, and Israel is responding back by firing back. Those mountains, that wall that you see is actually Lebanon. I'm standing at a place called Shalomi, which is right on the Israel-Lebanon border. It is the last village or kibbutz on the Israeli side, and on the other side what you see is Shalomi, and you can hear rockets being fired, missiles being fired, and RT guns being fired in response by the Israeli military. This area has been declared a militarized zone. People have been evacuated completely. It has become, cities and villages along the border have become a ghost border. Now the real threat remains that if Hezbollah opens a full front, Israel will have to fight the war on two fronts, one on the south with Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and one here in the north with Hezbollah. So the situation here is deteriorating by the minute as the Israeli army decide. You can hear these rocket fire behind me. That smoke that you see up there is the Hezbollah hitting territories inside Israel, and Israel responding back with its trying to neutralize their rockets and also hitting bases inside Lebanon of Hezbollah. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, had warned Hezbollah that if they jump into this war, he will finish them off as he's vowed to do with the Hamas. But that is easier said than done, because Hezbollah has the backing of Iran. Now, the real threat at this moment is the regional spillover. Will the war escalate? And this is what all countries have the apprehensions, and therefore you see heightened diplomacy happening in New York and elsewhere, Western leaders calling on Benjamin Netanyahu to ask him to take steps which prevents the war from escalating. With cameraman SP Dubey, this is Amritpal Singh at Shalomi on the Israel-Lebanon border for DD India. And as the Israel-Hamas conflict it enters its 24th day, the crisis in Gaza has deepened as the Israeli army escalated its ground operations in the Strait. The death toll in the Strait has crossed over 8,300. More than 20,000 injured, many people displaced.
Hundreds of families in Gaza have taken shelter in these tents of Khan Yunis. When it rains, it drips onto the people beneath them. These people have little access to food and water.
We suffered a lot. We cannot handle it anymore. We wish we had died under the rubble just to find some rest. Our life is torture. Since yesterday, I haven't had any bread. Can a child wait for bread? Where do I get bread? It's catastrophic.
Israeli military has called Palestinians to evacuate the northern Gaza Strip in view of the ongoing ground offensive. Hospitals have also received warning to evacuate, but thousands injured are receiving treatments. Many of them are in emergency wards.
We have received various warnings today. They mentioned that this area is going to be a military zone, that there will be clashes and the area will be dangerous, and that we have to evacuate quickly.
Humanitarian aid supplies to Gaza have been severely disrupted. A green picture of despair emerged from UN warehouses and distribution centers where people were seen looting boxes and bags of food aid. On the other side of the border, families of people taken hostage by Hamas are eagerly waiting for their loved ones. The United Nations has called for immediate release of hostages in Gaza and a humanitarian ceasefire.
The world is witnessing a humanitarian catastrophe taking place before our eyes. More than 2 million people with nowhere safe to go are being denied the essentials for life: food, water, shelter, and medical care, while being subjected to relentless bombardments. I urge all those with responsibility to step back from the brink. And I reiterate my appeal for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, the unconditional release of all hostages.
Adding to international concern, the International Committee of the Red Cross has also called for a temporary ceasefire and the establishment of more sustainable aid assistance to the Gaza Strip.
Humanitarian pause is urgently needed in Gaza to save more lives.
Thousands of lives have been lost in the conflict. People have been displaced. West Asia is on the brink of a major humanitarian crisis. Abhishek Bose for DD India.
And it's not just Gaza, it is also bombings are taking place in West Bank. Today, Jenin was bombarded. I took stock of the situation in West Bank's Ramallah as there were protests on the ground and people were angry. While most of the casualties are happening in the Gaza Strip with Israel stepping up its military campaign, but Israel is also hitting targets in West Bank. I'm right now standing inside Palestine and West Bank, and if I can ask my camera person to show you the scenes here, the people are protesting after a target was hit inside West Bank. So far, in various strikes within West Bank, over 110 people have been killed and many more arrested. In hundreds, about 700 people arrested. Arrests are being made every day, and over 2,000 people have been injured. So the people here ask that what is the logic of arresting or hitting targets inside West Bank? Though Israel says that Hamas has its supporters in West Bank and they are targeting them, but the question being asked in these protests is that why is Israel hitting them when Israel claims it is not hitting civilians. Civilians are merely collateral damage, and it is hitting Hamas terrorist bases. With cameraman SP Dubey, this is Amrit Pal Singh for DD India in West Bank, Palestine. And British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly has said that his country is working closely with Egypt, the United Arab Emirates and Israel to bring a humanitarian pause in Gaza.
Direct response to the emerging humanitarian situation in Gaza, the British Prime Minister announced more than doubling of our aid to the Palestinian people in Gaza, but at the moment that aid is predominantly stuck in Egypt. We're working extensively with the Egyptians, with the Israelis and others to try and have a humanitarian pause, temporary pause, so that we can get that humanitarian aid to the people that need it.
And hundreds of anti-Israeli protesters stormed the tarmac earlier today at an airport in Russia's southern region of Doordarshan. Police officers arrested 60 people. A senior Ukrainian official claimed that Kyiv had nothing to do with it and rejecting all accusations made by Russia. DD India's Dasha Cherenshova brings us this report from Moscow.
Well, we have seen the flurry of condemnation and criticism from the Russian officials, all saying that that is absolutely unacceptable. They have been calling for restraint, for peace, and for the attempts to remain calm in this very difficult period of time. At the same time, some Russian authorities have been saying that that is an incident that has been perpetrated from outside, stressing that the coordination of that rally, of that riot, has been taking place in the Telegram channel, which is operated from Ukraine. So the Russian authorities have unanimously criticized the protesters, saying that this was amounting to the terrorism activities and this should not be repeated. We also understand that some Russian officials have been saying that it is absolutely detrimental at this very period of time when Russia is also holding on its so-called special military operation in Ukraine, and all of the efforts of those riders should have been not in that place and not at that time. At the same time, obviously, we have seen a lot of criticism from the Russian officials stressing that the authorities should not allow that to happen once again. Of course, there are many questions as to why that did happen, and the authorities are trying to stress that that is an isolated incident and that is not the malaise that is spreading around the Russian society, as for instance the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has been hinting. So the isolated incident is probably the right description of that incident, but at the same time the Russian authorities are saying that this should not be repeated, and again there is a trace of outside influence in what has happened.
The World Bank has said that global oil prices are expected to rise to $90 a barrel in the current quarter due to tensions in the Middle East. As per a report, oil prices have already gone up by 6% since the start of the war.
Could be pushed into uncharted waters if the situation in the Middle East escalates, according to the World Bank. It warned that a worst-case scenario could see oil reach a record high of more than $150 a barrel. That's up from current levels of roughly $85 a barrel. The World Bank's latest commodity markets outlook outlines 3 risk scenarios based on historical events involving regional conflicts. Its large disruption scenario looks at the impact of the 1973 Arab oil embargo. Now, a disruption of that scale could remove as much as 8 million barrels of oil per day off the market, and that could send prices as high as $157 per barrel. The World Bank's chief economist warned the latest conflict in the Middle East comes on the heels of the biggest shock to commodity markets since the 1970s, and that's Russia's war with Ukraine. That had disruptive effects on the global economy that persist to this day. Now, the result of escalations in the Middle East could therefore see a dual energy shock on the global market and the global economy for the first time in decades. Economists warn sustained higher oil prices leads to higher food prices, and that could worsen food price inflation that's already been elevated in many developing countries. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
So that's it from me here in Jerusalem. Tanvi, back to you in the studio in New Delhi.
Thank you, Amritpal. You and your team, please be safe. It's being a long-drawn war with no signs of a ceasefire yet. So, as we reported earlier, casualties among Hezbollah fighters and Israeli soldiers continue to grow, and Hezbollah has announced that its chief, Hassan Nasrallah, will give his first televised speech since the beginning of the conflict. Remember, a new front is developing in southern Lebanon. DD India correspondent Mia Alberti has the latest.
Israel expands its ground offensive in Gaza, there are fears about what that means for the people here in Lebanon. We continue to see daily fighting between Hezbollah and Israel, who are exchanging fire across that Israel-Lebanon border. But some are saying a third phase in this fighting is now underway. First of all, because the expansion of the fighting, shelling has been happening more than 10 kilometers away from that border, so much deeper into both Lebanese and Israeli territory than before. We're also seeing increased drone activity and Hezbollah launching surface-to-air missiles. That's the first time they've used this kind of powerful weaponry. And on Monday, Hezbollah also announced that the head of this Iran-backed group, Hassan Nasrallah, will give a speech this Friday. It will be the first time we see Nasrallah since the clashes broke out, which is a relevant development. And so the situation is incredibly tense. We're talking 46 Hezbollah fighters, 7 Israeli soldiers already killed. Beirut is empty. The economy has taken a hit. Airlines are canceling their flights, and people are overall scared, concerned, and reliving painful memories from that last war in 2006. And Lebanese don't want a repeat of that. On Monday, Prime Minister Najib Mikati said he is doing his duty to prevent Lebanon from entering the war. And even the Iranian foreign minister on Sunday said that Iran does not want the war to spread out. So we are seeing these diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation between Hezbollah and Israel. But as the days pass, the tensions at that border are growing, and so do the fears that the situation could spiral out of control. Mia Alberti in Beirut, reporting for DD India.
You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. US President Joe Biden unveils the American government's first ever executive order on artificial intelligence.
Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes.
Connecting corners, cutting across continents.
Stories that matter from across the globe.
Accurate, authentic journalism that serves you right. From politics to glamour, from sports to world affairs, with a fusion of aesthetics and substance. Introducing news in a new avatar. Experience the world through a new lens. Stay tuned to DD India for an exciting journey beyond borders.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has said that Russia is ready for talks on the post-conflict settlement of the Ukraine crisis at a military forum in Beijing. Shoigu added that Russia is also ready for talks on further coexistence with the West. However, the Russian Defense Minister also said that the United States and its Asia-Pacific allies are undermining stability in the region, further accusing the United States of fueling geopolitical tensions.
Russia is open to discussing and resolving any security issues if this dialogue is honest, fair, and based on mutual respect of the contracting parties. However, without the West reconsidering its destructive line, which implies inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia, hardly any fruitful negotiations in this area are possible. However, should the necessary conditions be created, we remain ready for political discussions on realistic grounds, both on the post-conflict settlement of the Ukrainian crisis and on the parameters of further coexistence with the West as a whole.
On to America now. The United States has unveiled an extensive executive order on artificial intelligence aimed at tackling immigration, safety, and boosting technological advancements. The executive order establishes new standards for AI safety and security, protects U.S. nationals' privacy, advances equity and civil rights. The order mandates assessments for advanced AI models used by U.S. government workers and facilitate the entry of skilled workers. And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. The Spanish police seized 720 kilos of cocaine hidden among scrap metal in a truck from Costa Rica in the southern Spanish city of Malaga. 8 people were arrested across the Andalusia region. Mexico's hurricane-hit Acapulco is now on recovery path after Category 5 storm Otis hit the coastal city a few days earlier. The hurricane left 48 dead, with 36 people still missing. It also wrecked homes, hotels, and businesses. Serbian President Alexander Vučić met with French, Italian, and German leaders in Brussels on the sidelines of the EU summit to discuss pathways for de-escalating tensions with Kosovo. Nigeria has submitted a first-of-its-kind Pidgin language film, Mami Wata, as its candidate for the Best International Feature Film in the 96th Academy Awards. Mami Wata, which was shot entirely in black and white, is an exploration and creative reimagination of the mythology of a titular mermaid deity of West African folklore. And keepers at the London Zoo carved out Halloween pumpkins for 14,000 animals and stuffed them with special treats. Lionesses sniffed out treats hidden inside the pumpkins, while penguins were more interested in the fish next to the carved gourds. Mangalitsa pigs tucked into the seasonal treats as well. So with that, it's a wrap in this edition of DD India Global. Do join us again tomorrow at 5 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at DD India Live. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.
Turning crisis